what it appears to be.
Now, let's see. Oh, man. Okay. That's what I thought it was going to be able to connect to the event just in virtue of being where I scheduled it, but we are nonetheless live on both platforms.
Okay, cool. Oh, I see it popping up on Facebook. That's pretty cool.
Right?
And it allows for discussion. People can comment or.
Yep.
Nice. Okay. Very cool.
Okay, that was the only thing I just failed to somehow connect it to the event. That's okay. That's actually not a problem.
Okay. Nice.
All right, cool. Maybe I can put that donation link in there, anyways.
Okay. Okay. Yep. I see now. Awesome.
All right, cool. Cool. Well, let's see how it goes. It's a bit of a first. All right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this live episode of the Catholic Marriage and Intimacy podcast presented by the Apostolate for Marital Intimacy. I'm Theo McManigal with James Walther, and we are on the Monday right after NFP Awareness Week in the Catholic Church in the United States. We did an episode last week kind of highlighting the differences between NFP and contraception, and in some cases it's still baffling to me that we even have to explain it, but I guess the more I look into it, a lot of people really do have a hard time explaining it, but please watch that episode for more on it, because it's clear both from kind of nature and the teaching of the Church that there is a difference. But, this is one of those topics that in marriage prep all over the place comes up repeatedly, and yet at the same time, we're not trying to be just another source of marriage prep. We aren't afraid to talk about anything, and this is kind of an important part of Catholic married life, simply because on one hand we don't use contraception. We are the one Christian religion remaining that has held firm for its entire existence that contraception is immoral. And every Christian denomination agreed with us on this for the first 2,000 years, right? You couldn't be a follower of Christ and believe that it was possible to take the marital act and its procreative potential and interfere with it. But now, at least as an entire body, we are the last ones standing. At the same time, we realize now through further discoveries that God has made it such, fertility such, that it's a cycle, and there are times when the woman is more fertile and where she's less fertile. And yet, so there's just so many different aspects to this, to the doctrinal, to what the church has had to say, to the different methods, to kind of the spirituality and the mentality, the struggle that it's entailed. So I'm here with the man in charge, James, and we are combining this also with our July monthly live stream. And we're just going to talk a little bit about NFP and have a little bit of a free-ranging discussion. First, James, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well enough. Yourself?
Doing just fine, thank you. Just carrying on as usual, and yeah, I just wanted to take advantage of the fact that it was, the Church in the United States set aside a week to, kind of talk about NFP, make people aware of it. So, like I said, given that this is kind of an important part of Catholic marriage, it is something that our apostolate needs to be talking about and does talk about, and I'm sure it comes up a fair amount in your coaching, right?
Um, Yeah, I mean, I'd say the majority of my younger couples are practicing NFP in some form or fashion. Um, some are using it to try to conceive, some are just trying to whatever but tracking. Some are very deliberately trying to avoid. Um, so yeah, it's quite common.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. You know, I think it typically gets brought up whether for couples preparing for marriages or your typical pre-Cana stuff as like this is how you can avoid getting pregnant, which is true, but you can also use it to get pregnant. And there's I have to believe there's also a value for both wife and husband to just knowing where the wife is in her cycle on any given day. You don't have to do it, but that knowing where the cycle is, I mean, that just entails other things about what's going on with her body, her the way she sees things, or how she feels in general. Um, so seems like at least that would be valuable. But so, I mean, certainly it's not something you have to do, right? There's no obligation, but it is cool that we kind of know how to do it. But so I personally think the ability to do that is certainly a gift. But do you ever encounter cases in coaching where some of these couples, they really have a hard time either with it or because of it, or you actually find that it makes things more difficult?
Yeah, in what way are you thinking make it more difficult?
Sure. Uh, how about the abstinence?
Um, yeah, NFP can be pretty rough as far as the abstinence goes for some couples. Um, I mean, I have one couple currently that the wife cycle is pretty irregular, and they're very much trying to avoid, so they really only consider like 5 days out of the month to be their safe time. Now,
Mm,
is that medically the case? No, certainly not. Um, it could be just a matter of which method they use, or more precision in the method they use to have a wider window, but they're um, very cautious about that. Actually, I want to say, no, actually, I have two couples currently doing that where they have a very small window where they'll um, have sex just to be extra cautious. Um, you which is appropriate. Like, if you really want to avoid, then you should really follow um, uh, the protocol to the letter. Um, yeah, because I've also had couples who were kind of doing an FP, were planning on avoiding, and then lo and behold, like a month into coaching, they were pregnant. So, um, but with some couples with the abstinence, will um, depending on what we're doing in the coaching, if it's specifically around like things where they need to be having sex to do the exercises or interventions, excuse me, then sometimes we'll delay our sessions until after or right before the infertile window. Um, you know, so sometimes it can slow coaching up a little bit. Uh, but other interventions, excuse me, other interventions, it doesn't matter what part of the cycle um, they're in, because it doesn't involve having sex to do the exercise.
sure, sure. Um, what are some ways that couples can maintain their intimacy when they need to abstain for any reason?
Um, Physical touch, just physical contact is important. Physical intimacy isn't just about sex. Whether that's snuggling, it could be taking a shower together. Um, Alexander goes more in depth about like incomplete acts that he talks about doing during the infertile window. Um, you know, those are legitimate options. I don't necessarily recommend them to couples unless they're really struggling with that. Um, just because it is there's a certain degree of risk involved. So if they don't feel the need for that, then I would recommend more like just snuggling or you know showers together, something like that, where they have physical contact, but um, in a less directly sexual way.
Alexander's research of the manuals and his compendium and like what he's discovered regarding what they've had to say about such incomplete acts. That has been, in my time working here, probably one of the biggest discoveries.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had a sense that they had a lot to say about foreplay when the marital act would definitely follow, but I didn't realize that they actually talked about these things as being legitimate with qualifiers if the marital act is not intended to follow. So those definitely, for those who can handle or those who don't have such risk of pollution, as they say, yeah, no, that makes sense as a way too. But yeah, no, that's and there's also something to your relationship being better if you have a habit of physical touch and various signs of physical affection when you're not planning to engage in the marital act. Because they say that some people, if that's the only time you ever have physical touch, then your body is going to receive that, and especially for wives, then any physical touch at all, if you want to start to implement it, it can be kind of tough, especially if you're not as a couple in a place where it comes naturally. So I don't know. I just hear all kinds of like other people who do content on this say it's important to have physical touch even when you're not, when it's not right before the act.
Yeah, that is certainly true. The far too many couples have the habit of only getting handsy or flirtatious when they're trying to initiate, and it I encourage couples to sort of stay in sort of a constant state of flirtation and physical intimacy. That's going to sort of raise your baseline, your foundation of intimacy higher, so that when it's time to initiate, um, you're able to roll into that much more naturally um, than if it's sort of a cold start.
That's just a little bit off the topic of NFP. How can couples keep things flirtatious as they kind of go on in years and life is just kind of life? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, what works for 20-year-olds can work for 80-year-olds for many of those things. I mean, I've had couples well into their 80s who had far more sex than many of the couples I work with in their 20s. Uh, I'm very proud of it too. Um,
It should be.
yeah. Um, but flirtation can be pet names. It can be um, you know sensual comments. Um, it can be sensual touches. You know. Um, kind of the stereotype of like the husband who every time he walks behind his wife, he smacks her on the bottom. If that's something that they like doing, cheers, go for it. If that helps to keep some spice in their life, great. Um, I've had several couples where um, to sort of get the ball rolling. Sometimes you have to do a little bit of a pendulum swing to over
Hmm.
exaggerate things to get things rolling. So I've had several couples where for the first few weeks that we were starting coaching, part of the wife's homework was to flash her husband at least once a day. Um, Not necessarily nothing leading up. It could be the morning, afternoon, whenever, but some point during the day to flash her husband. And that never seems to go poorly. That always seems
Huh.
to go well. Very surprising.
Yeah, right.
Um, and so couples will do that. You know, caressing each other. Um, both husbands to their wives and wives to their husbands. You know, there's lots of things. Sometimes even a little sort of a naughty grin or a smile can, just add some playfulness to things.
Yeah, and some of this stuff might seem basic, especially for us who have our heads buried in this. But it can be so easy just for life to kind of keep going and get caught up in the monotony and actually forget to inject these things and try to make your life as fun as possible. I mean, it's already hard enough in a lot of different ways. So, I mean, man, if you like, it's important actually really not to forget this kind of stuff. But
Yep.
yeah, yeah. Well, and that's all like apart from what we're talking about when the time to use it. Like this is all never mind NFP or abstinence or any of that stuff. But at the same time, it is related because, like I said, I mean, the more fun you can make your life, the more connected you just feel to each other and to your joint life together. Everything is either better or at least tolerable, and that includes having to abstain. Um, Good. So, that's there's it's important to maintain your intimacy, of course, even when you have to abstain, simply because intimacy and sex is a part of intimacy, but intimacy is so much more than sex. So, uh, I mean, that's of course, a part of this. Now here's an interesting. I don't know about if it's all that interesting, but um, James, when you don't just work exclusively with Catholic couples, do you?
No.
So, is there anything you would say to even non-Catholic couples about, you know, is contraception bad for them too? And if so, why would that be?
Um, mm, so when we're looking at things like this, you have to look what domain are we looking at it from. Morally, we can say yes, everywhere and always it's immoral. When I'm
Absolutely.
speaking with non-Catholic clients, um, you know, they don't care about that moral element necessarily, um,
Right.
and it's not my place to impose that on them. Right, that is a principle in coaching and in therapy both, that the client has a right to self determination and to determine their own values. Now, with Catholic couples, I can instruct them on what does the church teach, and educate them, but it's not my job to impose or say, dictate what you do. The role of a coach or a therapist, the type of therapy that I do is not authoritarian, right? It's not. It's more collaborative. And coaching is very much like that. Um, so, um, one of the issues with hormonal birth control is how it affects a woman's cycle, and her libido. Um, some women, it depends on what type and what variety she's on, but some women it can increase their libido. Some women it can, kind of flatten their libido. Some it just basically kills it. So understanding what type of, how does that affect her? How does that affect, um, her body and her natural desires, um, is important. Um, so far, I actually don't think I've had more than one or two, um, clients who were using hormonal birth control when we started. Um, I don't think any have used it beyond a month or so in. Because NFP is just, well, yes, it sure, you could say that, hormonal contraceptive allows you to have sex as much as you want. Um, for many people, it just kills the libido. So it's like there's no point in doing so, right? Better to have good sex on a few weeks out of the month than pathetic sex once a week. So I don't think I've had any who continue using it. I've had several that I've gotten started on NFP or got to switch models to find a better NFP model for them. But yeah.
What is it about? One of the things I've heard about the hormonal contraceptive, the pill for women, is sometimes when couples who are not married, you have the woman taking the pill, and then eventually, at some point after they get married, she gets off the pill because they're interested in having a child, and she feels completely different about him because the pill can apparently have some impact on who you're attracted to. Have you heard about this?
Yeah. What that's talking about is how during the fertile phase, right, during your follicular phase, a woman is going to, normally speaking, is going to be aroused by a man that is sort of fits more traditional masculine phenotypes. So, muscular, deeper voice, right? So those secondary sex characteristics typically are going to become more attractive as they're ovulating, right? Because their body wants to find a mate who will be, one, successful at impregnating them, and two, being that, protector and provider. Right now, it's kind of, and I mean, this is something that's talked a lot on, social media threads, Reddit and Twitter and whatnot. To the extent of how much it truly is affecting modern society, I don't know. I don't presume to just make random guesses about the extent of the damage, but I mean, it is a known fact that a large percentage of the American female population is using hormonal birth control. Hormonal birth control is not filtered out in our water supply systems, so it is being distributed in the water, so estrogen and progesterone. How much that is actually affecting the male population is yet to be exhaustively studied. I mean, we do see that testosterone levels have significantly declined in the average male population over the last several decades. So there probably is something to that, at least enough to hypothesize that that would be a cause. So interestingly, women are taking hormones that are not having them go into that phase where they are being aroused by masculine men, and over time we're having less masculine men, right? By just simply not having enough testosterone, or their testosterone being overwhelmed by consuming a lot of female hormones.
Among other things
Mm-hmm.
that are kind of maybe inherent to our lifestyle now, or at least correlate with that are not optimal for high testosterone levels. I mean, we're indoors all. I don't know. I don't want to make a lot of scientific claims. This is not my expertise to the level that it is yours, but just we move less. We're indoors more. We work desk jobs. Not all of us, but it's hard to believe that these things don't, at some point level, have an impact.
Well,
Food
even
quality.
yeah, food is a big factor. Even in communities where there's high demand for physical strength and physical activity, which are factors in testosterone development, numbers are low. For example, they did a study, I want to say it was like 2 years ago, on the special warfare community. And I want to say over 50% of the operators were low on T. That's why actually it was sometime I want to say the beginning of last week, they just issued a new DoD policy of providing testosterone therapy for male service members. So, because of how much of the military is low on testosterone, and obviously for our line of work, having testosterone is important for males, especially in muscle development, muscle recovery, having sufficient aggression. It's kind of helpful. When your job description includes the force of violence, having a certain degree of calculated, controlled aggression, it's kind of helpful.
And it's just another example of how all these things that people think can really just be a private matter, like, oh, I'll just take my pill and it'll be our sexual relationship and it won't really matter. Lo and behold, it is having this wide-spreading effect. I'm not really a believer that anything can truly ever be a private matter, just because what we do in private affects how we show up in public, and this is of course coming from my work at Covenant Eyes, helping with the pornography issue and what have you. But man, and I think it was mostly the pill that prompted Pope St. Paul VI and Humanae Vitae, because most of the other contraceptive methods were kind of out there and known, and Casti Connubii was already kind of responding to its kind of beginning to be accepted in Christianity. But I think it was the pill that kind of prompted Paul VI. Does that sound right?
Yes. So contraceptives have been around in one form or fashion for millennia.
Sure.
I mean, there's a reason why the Hippocratic Oath talks about not providing abortion. There's also been plants that were considered to serve as contraceptives historically, and abortifacients.
Wow.
Condoms have been around for centuries. Historically, they used sheep intestine. Or like skins, they sewed, varying degrees of success, I guess. But people have been attempting to use contraceptives for quite some time. The modern condom, I want to say, was developed in the late 1800s. The American Birth Control League from Margaret Sanger, that was already, I want to say that was in full swing in the early 20s. And it's been a little while since it's probably been a decade since I studied that, but I'm trying to remember. Yeah, the methods at that time were a little on the creative side. Like there was one which involved using Lysol as a douche, a vaginal douche after sex. Not necessarily a good idea. It definitely caused, or should have caused, plenty of trips to the ER, except for ERs weren't really a thing at the time. But yeah,
Yikes.
they tried all sorts of stuff. So yeah, the pill was considered the big revolutionary thing that he was responding to. Unfortunately so, because I mean that at first, even many devout Catholics weren't quite sure what to make of it, right? Because it was initially just proposed as something that would, regulate the woman's cycle or prevent her from ovulating. It's like I remember reading something about way back when it first came out, they started giving birth control to nuns who were sent on to the missions in Africa, so that if and sometimes when they got raped, they wouldn't conceive. Because at the time they didn't realize that it was secondary. I mean, yes, it can prevent ovulation, but secondarily, it will prevent implantation, so causing an abortion. So it was definitely providential that the Holy Father decided to recognize the gravity and the confusion around hormonal birth control and addressed it as directly as he did.
Well, and yeah, I mean that example of the nuns, that's kind of a, there's obviously a huge difference between that and then people who want to take advantage of this kind of thing. But I can see where it needed its own kind of address from the church, because every other method of birth control, or just about all of them, contraception, it's a barrier, right, between the sperm being able to reach the egg. It prevents it in some way, whether you're talking about a condom or an IUD or a sponge or what have you. The pill isn't a barrier in that physical sense. It is in the sense that it shuts down the fertility, thus it's essentially a barrier, but I could see where enough people at the time would have been confused by it, thus it needing its own address.
Yeah, so IUDs are not a barrier method. They are a hormonal method.
Oh, really? I just don't know what I'm talking about in that regard. Okay.
No, yeah, it's just where is it placed so that it can just give a continuous dose. They also have ones that are implanted under in the arm, under the skin. I want to say those ones last up to 2 years. Yeah, so the barrier method is the oldest method. Obviously, onanism itself, just withdrawal method.
Yes.
Is really the oldest, but yes, historically the barrier methods were the kind of the go-to, and then hormonal birth control came along. Now we see umpteen gazillion different types of it. The sponge you mentioned actually had, I don't think those are produced anymore. I want to say the sponge.
Really only know that one from Seinfeld. I don't know if you ever
Yeah,
watched
no,
it.
the classic Seinfeld reference, and that actually, if I'm not mistaken, was a thing that's why they put it in the show, is because people were freaking out because women liked it, but actually it was because it was not effective, and I want to say it was causing cervical cancer. But I want to say that one did include hormonal birth control, or no, I think that one had a spermicide. So that's another common one.
Oh, okay.
You don't see that. Not quite the most common. It's not what like Planned Parenthood likes to recommend. The most spermicides are on the lesser effective version, but some people do use those. That's why it's important to always check what type of lube a couple is using. The number that are used, like actual spermicides, are not incredibly common. Usually you'll find them in a pharmacy. But some, like, is it Astroglide? There's a few of them that are effectively spermicides. You can morally use them because it's not intentional, but they can effectively be spermicides because of how thick they are. The viscosity is so high that it makes it difficult for the sperm to swim. It doesn't prevent them, properly speaking, so it's not properly speaking a contraceptive. But it is, if you're trying to conceive, certainly you would want to avoid those entirely.
Well, and if anyone is listening, like you can use it, but if you are now going to use it as a way to try and have it be contraceptive, then the fault would be in your intention.
Right. And when I say like you can use it, I'd say that like if you like that's all you have. Like I mean,
Right.
You can use olive oil and all sorts of stuff.
Right.
There's 20 things that you can use. It doesn't mean it's a good choice.
Right. No, but that's That's but yeah, I mean, I could see how the pill, right, would be revolutionary, and it was, but but it's, I mean, for the church to recognize that you're still, even if you're not putting up some kind of physical obstruction, you are you are causing the woman's body to become infertile,
Mm-hmm.
contrary to nature. I mean, and that's really it. It's I mean, yeah, I guess when you look in and you see all over the internet, there actually is a lot of confusion about the difference between NFP and contraception, and that's kind of a tough one for me because I'm kind of losing patience with people who are like, oh yeah, they're basically the same, and I just want to be like, no, they're not. But it's easy to confuse because the intention is the same, right? I want to be able to have relations and not conceive. It's the same intention, but the means by the moral object, the means by which you're doing it, are completely different. In one case, you're obstructing the act, you're placing a barrier, you're shutting down the fertility of the body, whereas in the other case, you're simply waiting until the body is not infertile. And some might think, well, can't you just have an intervention to bring about what the body's going to do naturally? But I do like the way Christopher West once responded to that question. I heard him giving some talk, and he's like, "Well, what's the difference between letting Grandma die and killing her?" Everything.
Right.
So, it's a matter of, I mean, at the end of the day, what is sin? Sin is an offense against God. God has designed us and certain elements of us, particularly our sexuality, to have a certain purpose and to operate to a certain course. But to mess with his design is to offend him and therefore to sin. So the difference between letting the infertility, letting the cycle get to the infertile point and bringing it about that way is to mess with his design and thereby to offend him. So, but that's, I mean, I guess it's easy. It's easy for me to grasp, but I can still understand why so many
I
people,
think
well,
that
I don't know if I can understand it, but they do, apparently.
Well, I think that a lot of people that you see online in this point of debate um, are grasping at a certain degree of truth in that um, they see Catholics, and there are Catholics who do this, who use it with a contraceptive mentality, right? So, and I mean by that, yes, like the object you are intending to have sex and not get pregnant, right? That is the hope. When I say a contraceptive mentality, I'm saying that you're opposed to life, right? Um, there's a big difference in saying, okay, we want to space children, right? For like the wife to recover after one pregnancy physically to be able to carry the next pregnancy, right? There versus saying, nah, just don't want kids. You that where there is no grave reason, where it's just sort of it's that same selfishness that we see in contraception. You know, that I think is what a lot of people you're seeing on the internet sort of intuitively catching on that it's the element of selfishness very much can be present in a couple that is using an FP, and that element is very similar to a couple that's using contraception, right? And to that degree, right, it can be venially sinful. Um, I haven't really delved into whether or not it would be mortally sinful, because objectively you are still um, doing NFP proper, right? So the object is. I'd have to do some reflection on that, I guess. But that is one point where I have cautioned couples to, when they're looking at whether or not to do NFP, is to check in on your motives. Why are you doing this? Like one thing couples I've worked with when they're preparing for marriage, and it's like, okay, they're planning on using NFP right out the gate. Like, okay, nothing wrong with that necessarily, but it's like, what's your benchmark here? When is it going to be the right time? to start having kids, you know. And sure, newlyweds, like getting, married and the struggle of getting set up, getting a house, all those things, sure, maybe that for them is a sufficient reason to abstain. But like I've had worked with people where they said, oh yeah, well, just like we've heard a lot of people give us the advice that we should focus on a relationship for the first year and not have kids because we need to focus on us. It's like, that's not a good reason. No, that's somebody just made that up. Okay, that has no grounding in anything anywhere that you're going to have a better marriage because you chose to not have kids for the first year. No.
I mean, even if you get pregnant on the honeymoon, you still have 9 months.
Right. And honestly, it doesn't matter the time frame before having your first child as to how it affects your marriage. It's how intentional are you about building intimacy prior to the birth of your first child, and your intentionality in the months following that birth. A very common turning point with couples' intimacy is at the birth of their first child, because that's the point where we see their language shifting from relational to transactional, where they're no longer talking principally about their hopes and dreams and desires and each other, to talking about chores and tasks. Did you get the baby? Did you do this, right? Because there's a lot, small people have a lot of needs. And so while there's an appropriate focus on that, the problem is that a lot of couples do a sort of a 180. They switch from being predominantly relational with some transactional to being predominantly transactional and almost no relational. And many couples I work with, that's sort of we can identify that point as the moment their marriage started to decline, their intimacy started to decline. But if they're intentional about it, then their intimacy will continue to grow. It has, even if you only have 9 months to prep, or less than 9 months, if you get pregnant before you get married, that's still time to grow in intimacy. You should be working on growing in intimacy from the first date. So, anyways.
Yeah, for sure. Just a few things there. I personally don't know if I love the idea of, and if, like, even when it's used wrongly, of the phrase contraceptive mentality, only because I've become so kind of passionate about the idea that the core of contraception is not the intention of contraception might be the intention to avoid children, but the core of contraception is the placing of the barrier. But I think it is actually important to, the NFP can be used with a selfish mentality. I actually want to read to you just from the Catechism. I also want to get this on screen because I forgot to read from it in the last podcast episode that I did on this. But I think it's a very important section here, because I don't know if it gets brought up in the marriage preparation sessions that people have. Maybe it does, and I hope it does. But the Catechism 2368 says this: a particular aspect of this responsibility with responsible parenthood concerns the regulation of procreation. For just reasons, spouses may wish to space the births of their children. It is their duty to make certain that their desire is not motivated by selfishness, but is in conformity with the generosity appropriate to responsible parenthood. Moreover, they should conform their behavior to the objective criteria of morality. Okay, so that obviously means don't use contraception, but I think it is important to point out that the Catechism of the Catholic Church does emphasize it's their duty to make sure that they're not being selfish about this. I do think it's notable that it uses the phrase just reasons, and if you look at Humanae Vitae, section 16, it uses the phrase well-grounded reasons. That's the only reason I like to not necessarily use the phrase grave reason, although Pope Pius XII did use the phrase grave reason to say that a couple would need, that's what a couple would need to use NFP their whole marriage, like to never have kids, basically, on purpose. That would have to be grave. And that's understandable. That makes sense because, if you can, then you should. at least try, right? But otherwise at particular times. But basically, you have to be able to point to some element of whatever, our health, our finances, how this would affect our kids now, not just we don't want to. Fortunately, we can't really sit in judgment of where anybody else is at. That is between them and God, but that is an important element of how you form your conscience.
Well, when in doubt, ask your priest.
Right.
That's what they're there for. I, I mention that to people all the time that are talking about NFP. It's like, well, how do we discern? Ask. You have a pastor for a reason. Go ask him if this is a sufficient reason. And I do think that sufficient or grave reason is still justifiable because, look, notice the Catechism is making that comparison between selfishness and generosity, right? Generosity is your gift, right? If it's not like a reason, it's inconvenient. Inconvenient is a reason. Like kids are pretty much always inconvenient. That's their nature to be inconvenient. Pregnancy is
you're never ready. My brother told me that. He was right.
Right.
You're never ready.
So that is a reason, and sure, you could say it's a just reason, but what does the Catechism mean by just reason? Right? I think there has to be a certain degree of gravity and not just it's inconvenient. Maybe that's not totally selfish, but
I would equate the two, but at this point, I think we would be discussing semantics.
yeah,
So
fair enough.
But I think at the core, only it is between the couple and God, but they'll know if they're in their heart if they're being selfish, or if they can point to something to say this was really, and we really weren't trying to be selfish. We did our best to say, hey, this is that we had a reason here, and God will know, and He's the best judge of all of this. But man, I don't know. It's easy to look. I don't know if you ever watch any shows about this kind of stuff, or if when you have time to just relax, you kind of put this stuff out of your mind. But my wife and I, we actually watched the show Blue Therapy on Netflix, and I recommend it. I do. Just to even if it's for nothing else for you and Megan to be like, maybe the therapist should have gave this advice, but it's basically a couples counseling show.
Oh yes, I've had so many people recommend it. You got to realize that I'm still active duty in the Army, so I'm there from 6 or 8 o'clock in the morning till 3, and then I have sessions with couples from 5 till 11. So the last thing I want to do when I get home is watch a show about therapy.
Well, and like I said, some people want to put it, when it's your life in a way, when it's your kind of your profession. Some people want to just put themselves apart from it, and others like to do more of it. It's like when I was teaching high school. My wife and I also got into Abbott Elementary. I remember talking with one of my fellow teachers, like, I don't want to watch a show about my life,
Yeah.
but for us, it was cool, and then when we stopped teaching too, it was kind of cool to watch it. But in any event, I think the thing that stuck out to me with this show though, is when you just look at a number of couples who, and we've talked about this before, how, the dating to marriage phase doesn't have to be very long. But there are just so many couples these days, like, well, do we actually want to get married, or do we even believe in marriage? And next thing you know, they've been together for 8 or 10 years, haven't even made those decisions, wasted 10 years of that woman's fertility. And like, these things have consequences for humanity. That's possibly 5 more people who would be on this earth and possibly in heaven who are not. That's a big deal. I really think, and at some point I'll have more content on this, but I really think that when you're in the dating phase, you actually have to think of justice and what the marriage you're hoping for is the impact you're going to have on the world and the church.
Yeah.
Now, the show wasn't approaching it from that perspective or whatever, and my wife and I like to always analyze relational aspects when we watch shows and movies, especially marriage stuff. I think that's actually a good exercise for couples. I think just to like talk about what you're seeing the spouses do, not do, what they should do, and then how you apply it. I don't know. That's kind of cool. That's something we enjoy though.
Fun.
But yeah. So I mean, still this idea though. I mean, this is where the whole a question of having kids comes into play too. Not that I'm saying people who are married should not be having kids, but I am saying that there's an importance to considering the procreative element of your marriage when you're entering into it, or at least the potential for it. So I don't know. It's funny though because I'm actually pretty passionate about this, but a lot of like some of the content and some of the like comment discussion I get into is actually like I'm defending the church's position on NFP, but I'm actually pretty passionate about like the importance of making sure couples are mindful of the procreative element of what the vocation of marriage is supposed to be. But so that all that, but see, all of that plays into the discussion of NFP, which is why we'll have more episodes and more articles and different things on this, just because, like I said, there's so many different elements to it, and certainly I know as much as I know, but that's probably we'll see if we can get some other some of our other colleagues who are well versed in different things to come on and talk about different parts of it too. I mean, there's certainly a lot more to consider in Catholic marriage, but because this has been made so important, obviously we have to add our voice to the relevant discussion. But I think that, yeah, like I said, I think I'm pretty well versed at this point in the idea that these things are not the same, but at least NFP, contraception, what have you. But that's part of what we'll still have to keep teaching people. So. Anything you want to leave us with for the month, whether it's about this or anything else?
Just that, we really appreciate everybody who stepped up to help out with our donations and with joining our membership, our supporters page on our website is very beneficial. It's only through those regular donations that we can really budget as a small nonprofit, and because we're so small, all donations make a difference. So we really appreciate everybody who has helped. It's not a ton of people, so it's definitely meaningful. The ones who have contributed, whether it's through the Patreon or through the supporters page on the site, but it definitely is very impactful, and for our content, for being able to put stuff like this out, for being able to promote the coaching. My coaching caseload currently is full. We're having to put people on a waiting list because we're getting such high demand. And actually having to refer people out to other coaches even to try to keep up with everybody. We have several print projects coming down the pike. So we have a lot of good stuff coming. So all the support from people is it's having an effect. We get inquiries and comments from people practically every day now, telling us about how this has impacted their marriage, or that they're so grateful to have finally found this. So we'll keep plugging away, keep trying to put out good stuff, but we really appreciate everybody who likes, subscribes, shares, all that fun stuff, and helps it keep going.
Real quick, in 30 seconds or less, there's a lot of Catholic marriage ministries and different things out there. We are unique because
we address issues very directly. We address sexual issues on the head. The questions that you have, that you've looked at the catechism, you've read around, you're like, can I do X, Y, or Z? Most of the time you're going to find principles on these other sites and these other resources, and that's great. But when you need a solid, direct answer on these things, we're the place to come. Because if we don't already have an article on it, you can always meet with Alexander and he can answer it directly. You can meet with me, I can answer it directly, but we will address those things. We have the experience and the study in these topics to be able to do that, which a lot of places don't. You know, your average pastor, he got 1 semester in theology of the body, and he didn't even touch a tenth of what Alexander has covered in his compendium. You know, and that's not no shame on any priest. Like that's not, they have a lot to study. Seminary, you have a lot packed in there, but it's not their forte. This is our forte. This is what we've spent years working to develop and to provide, and we're here to make it available to as many people as we can.
So please continue to support us, continue to listen to this podcast and read our websites. Please like, subscribe, give us a follow wherever you're watching this, share, comment. All of this is good for the algorithms. Thank you, James, for another good discussion. And thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Catholic Marriage and Intimacy Podcast, live edition. We'll see you next time. God bless you, and glory to Jesus Christ.